Welcome back to Examining the Witness. We are doing a kind of mini episode today. We're back here in the Marsh, and we're not going to talk about the puzzles of this area. We're here to talk about the Titanic statue that's carved into the mountain and all the other statues that it is related to, which you probably know about this one, but there's almost kind of like a network that goes out of interrelated illusions and things, and the symbolism behind all of these. So I always love talking about the statues and the windows. They're always fun. Some areas like the fortress and the mountaintop are just chock full of statues. But this one obviously is different because it's about 20 times bigger than any of the others. Clearly aspirational. It's like this mega scale. It's literally larger than life. All the other statues are like exactly the same human scale as the player. Versus this one is like this giant Titan bestriding the land of the witness. So it must have a kind of meaning, like the attitude that the statue is expressing. Seems like it's something that's being endorsed by the game, not just as like here's yet another perspective on the island of the witness, but as something that is
a core message.
Yeah. Yeah, it also means that she's abstract, right? So we have this like beautiful young woman, but she's not like a particular woman or a particular person the way that the other characters up on the mountain are. She's sort of an ideal, right? She's something that we should all be aspiring to. The witness is telling us, and so what is she doing? She's like reaching upwards, right? It's this like hopeful, aspirational gesture towards the sky. She's it's kind of transformational, right? She's like in the process of like coming into being, almost, being carved out of the mountain, and so it's sort of like a awakening, or like
right. She's not complete. She's not standing independently. She is emerging.
Yeah, she's like in the process of it's like self-development, and it's exploratory, but very joyful, right? She's not like banging her head against how to solve all these puzzles, or like being super depressed that we're adrift in the universe with no meaning,
right, like
or
she's
something.
Not sitting on the ground struggling with a puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost, I would say, like a Nietzschean kind of thing, like joyful wisdom. Like she's like going forth, except that with anything Nietzsche, there's like so much about like the will and stuff. Versus this is like open and kind of receptive and. It's like there's like a sense of awe and wonder at just like the majesty of of our sensory experience, and just like of the existence of the universe, and like all of this like colorful world that that we find ourselves in with the island. So I think that's kind of the symbolism on an individual level, is just kind of celebrating life and being curious and being kind of like confident and assured, like feeling capable, like how the James Burke video tells you to like feel like you can understand anything if it's explained clearly enough, like how the puzzles are hopefully like not making you want to throw your laptop across the room, but sort of encouraging you and making you feel like you can master these concepts, right? And she's like aspiring, as is so much witness symbolism, to like to cross that bridge, and to like put all those final pieces together, and sort of cross the bridge between the third person scientific world and the first person world of consciousness, and like really get a grasp of those fundamental mysteries. So even though the witness is like it's very like it doesn't have the answers, it's a game about questions, it like wants us to go forth with sort of like confidence and joy rather than feeling lost in doubt. So it's a beautiful statue, and you can see it all over the island. Another thing that's notable, this just emphasizes the statue's importance, is that it's like a key way station on the path up the mountain, right? So we're gonna do our mountain episode later. We're gonna talk about all the like super sweet stuff up there, but just to go partway up, via this kind of zigzaggy, steep back way. Across this really awesome kind of like, I don't know, like Zen tree or something, and then up here, right before things start getting like snowy and the like, you know, kind of pale color grading kicks in of higher up. We get to, you know, we get right on top of the statue, and we get to see the viewpoint of like looking out over all the island, and
How rich and colorful and like so much detail is out there.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of like the first person perspective, of course, of like what the statue is seeing, and this like wide open sky, like how you know, meditative people sometimes talk about, you know, think of your field of view as like, you know, wide open like the sky, or like, you know, without boundary. We also see this little bit of architectural detail about how, of course, it wouldn't make sense to have the arm carved from, like, the stone wouldn't support itself. The mountain would have had to have been like,
like twice as big,
like 20 feet thicker in order. So the arm is, you know, I don't know if that's like symbolic or if it's just like architectural realism to the statue. But if you wanted to interpret it as symbolic, I guess I would say like it's not just carving away the mountain. You know, it's really, it's part of that narrative of like the process of becoming, right? Because she's, you know, coming out of the rock in like a negative sense of like being carved out of the rock, but then even emerging kind of like into the open air, and having this architectural element, you know, built up, and it's also a little bit technological, just like the Marsh and its sort of confident ideas about how we're gonna build up the scientific knowledge. I think that kind of confidence of the Marsh area. The statue obviously is not entirely of the Marsh, because it's this huge thing that you can see from all over the Witness, just like all the views that we've been showing. But it does seem to have some of that kind of like maybe scientific confidence of like, we're gonna solve it, we're gonna put everything together, you know. Oh, and speaking of which, another crucial thing about this is I've been talking about the individual attitude. The Witness is saying you should have this attitude towards the big questions of life, and just towards the you know, your experience in the universe. But I think another thing that is represented by the statue being so titanic is that it's more civilizational. One of the interesting things about this game that I've touched on many times is that unlike Braid and unlike some, you know, the focus is on like the search for truth and trying to understand these big questions, but it's also about how there's all of these different perspectives, and it's, the questions are so big and they need so much detail, like in the Marsh episode where I was talking about like we even need the guys who are like studying the bacteria and stuff, that the questions are kind of like multifaceted and modular, and this is going to have to be a civilizational project for everyone to kind of come together and slowly build up this knowledge over time to create some, I don't know, some kind of utopian future world in which this knowledge that we're now so much doubt is like more clearly available to people, or at least, you know, we can explainable to people.
So it's like an image of collective effort, not one person but multiple people kind of coming out together.
Yeah, it's sort of like a titan representing the world spirit or something, in addition to the individual attitude. It's like, imagine if our society could have this kind of joyful exploration, and again, not like one set vision, right? Like the Feynman quotes about the importance of doubt, and, you know, the search for the open channel, the need to, you know, in like a kind of, for society to be sort of open and allow people freedom to pursue their own vision of you know, what it means. So it's so it's just kind of like a embodiment both on the individual level and I think on the civilizational level of like the kind of open exploratory attitude that the Witness thinks that we need. But also, we all need a little bit of help, right? And so we have this famous illusion, probably the most famous illusion of the Witness, of all of the kind of like fun little like sculptures and things, where we have this statue of a purely human scale, like the others on the island, giving a helping hand to this like epic civilizational, super self-confident person who seems like they like have everything 100% figured out and are like the embodiment of like, you know, this independent force going like forward and becoming
the truth out of the air, like it's just that easy.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like transformed into like, whoa, like, you know, maybe they're asking for help or something, or they
or they couldn't go anywhere without the help of someone else.
Yeah. So I think it reiterates the. I mean, first of all, it's just a classic witness like 2D, 3D moment, just like the environmental puzzles and so much else. Like it just kind of gets you thinking, like, whoa, like my visual field is a flat.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Like, what is her real size? Is it this or the other?
Yeah, exactly. So, so it's it's like the tree in the desert area that we also made a little mini episode on, and it's like so many other like just kind of 2D, 3D moments. But yeah, so one thing that it does is it suddenly like humanizes her, takes her from the civilizational scale to the individual scale, and says, this like kind of brings it back into the world of reality rather than this kind of like Titanic romanticized like idealization. And also the statues are the same person, right? I mean, as far as I can tell, like this looks like the same facial features basically. And it could have been like a guy up here, or like I don't know, like just someone totally different, like a much older person or something. But I think it's this kind of mirror image, which almost to me feels like a kind of like a Jacob's ladder thing, or like kind of pulling oneself up by one's bootstraps sort of thing, where it's like this is sort of the inferior person, right? Her face is in shadow. She's like
just smaller.
Well, yeah, she's smaller. She's not like super confident. She's like being helpful. Versus this person is like this like Venus-esque like image of like beauty and youthfulness and exploration. And so I kind of see this as like this paradox of like the real life person, with the flaws and with just kind of like the more relatable person who is in this ironic position of helping this kind of like idealized person come into being, right? And it's like pulling this person into existence out of the rock. So I think part of the message of this is like society and how we all kind of rely on each other, but part of the message is also like about ourselves and like our own process of like self-cultivation, becoming the person that we want to be, and how like our kind of ordinary fallible selves can help create a better self in the future, even though that seems impossible. So I think that's a beautiful thing about the statue, and one of the reasons why it's resonated with so many people. Also, there's this interesting, like she's on this box, which is one of these boxes from this random stuff in here and all these support structures, but it's eroded away. Like I don't know, this like the box could have been over here and she'd just be reaching off the edge instead of have this little curve here. I think the curve lines up nicely if you sort of take in this view. I mean, of course they had to have kind of a cutaway, because she's reaching down to this person, but there's sort of there's like this steel mesh which becomes as tall in the image as the mountain here, or almost as tall, which is probably reading too much into this to be like, oh, this is like science and like the modern world or something, but this does seem, remember those images in the monastery, which maybe we can get a picture up of the chasm and the person reaching across that chasm for that goblet, and that's kind of, there's been this metaphor image of the reaching across the chasm, or trying to build a bridge between these two sides, right? And so this kind of feels like it's also, she's helping this person across the chasm, maybe between the first person conscious experience of like this natural world and then the kind of the abstract hierarchical world of like thought, which is like this human constructed thing made of all these little squares and right angles and whatnot,
categories and whatnot.
Yeah, so it's possible that symbolism is going on here. We also have another element to this. So this little plank is out here to give us a viewpoint on this, but if you're not looking at this illusion, then like, what is the statue doing? Like, just trying to, it lost something. Maybe the other part of the box fell off, and she's like, oh shit, I was trying to weld this box. But the game lets you kind of spiral up around here and then be in this first person perspective. We are looking up at, just like how we can get the first person perspective up here by standing up like literally on her head and seeing through her eyes. Here we get to see again through this character's eyes, right? Of looking up and like getting the helping hand. Yeah, so we're putting ourselves, I mean, this is like literally putting ourselves in the position of the idealized statue, you know? So the witness is like, you should be like her. And then I'm like, yeah, now I'm being like her. You know, and of course just get to see the, you know, just the sort of like compassion and, you know, expression of aid that this statue's offering. And of course this also, the kind of like 2D, 3D, and the statue that you see from the side and also in first person and stuff, recalls something from way over on the other end of the map, which is that like Nicholas of Cusa guy who's out on that little peninsula who's reaching up to a goblet, and it's like he can't reach the goblet, but then his shadow, but like he has captured the goblet. So that's a similar kind of thing where you have this like impossible illusory situation, and you have like the kind of, it's like, I mean, the reason this is doing this is because it's like the first person, third person, the witness is doing like, how could you cross this impossible gap? But from another perspective, it's already crossed. It's like you've always already had this experience of consciousness. Like there's no, you know, so it's kind of, I don't know, potent bit of symbolism.
Another
just the
thing
witness
that's going on here is like, look where you go back up there, and you're in this point of view, right? Like in front of you, you have like all of this like mesh in the way between you and the real world of all those beautiful trees. Like you're in a cage. And she's like, no, just step outside of the cage.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, like you're looking forward, you're like, wow, like, this sucks. It's just panel puzzles forever. And she's like, no, like climb up, you know, top this mountain with me. We can take a kind of top-down approach, you know, and then maybe we'll solve some different puzzles or, realize some things. Yeah, that's really cool. Because this does look ugly as hell, especially
like,
with this like awkward cutout here.
Stop trying to see the world in pixels or whatever. Put it all together.
Yeah, so that's it for this statue, you might think, except actually this is the witness, and so of course there's going to be even more layers going on here. Communicate, like what is this person grasping at? What is, you know, like what, if you come out here, so earlier, and we're going to see in a moment that in this area you have this very obnoxious to navigate like series of, I don't know, just like
walkways.
Little walkway plank things that's also in the mangrove forest, and they'll use this to kind of indicate they'll use an empty one because players realize that even if they don't realize this consciously, that like everything in the witness is kind of there for a purpose, and so when you just have like something out to the middle of nowhere.
Well, even if you're not thinking about the witness, you're just thinking about like who built this. You're like, okay, why is this here? Like, what's going on? There might be something out there.
Yeah. So like this, I mean, like they could have, I don't know, had this little puzzle like connect out here, so that you'd just be like, aha, like let me just, you know, cross the puzzle and then I'll get over there and then I'll solve. But instead they put this, you know, they put this viewpoint out on this useless spur to make it more likely that you would see it, because you come out here, you're kind of like, okay, like, what's the point of this? You know, and then looking around, you might notice this illusion. This little useless spur has kind of a double function because it also seems to be pointing, not square on, but pretty close, to this, like, crashed boat right near the ending area of the game, which has this beautiful audio log and has stuff to say about, I don't know, Taoism and enlightenment and death and the kind of the philosophy of Spinoza and all these crazy things, but I'm not, this is like kind of a complicated audio log and I'm not totally have well-formed thoughts about it, so we're going to talk about it when we do the mountain area. I don't think it ties into this stuff that much. I think it's just kind of, dare I say, a coincidence, but I'm sure we can connect the dots later on. So anyways, that's all. Just say that these little spurs are often used, you know, the witness will put something to clue you in to the fact that there is there's a special viewpoint, or something you should notice. So you might remember from the Marsh episode, this little bonus area, this area is not necessary in order to solve the Marsh area and get the lasers. And down here we have the Feynman audio log and the awesome little tetromino puzzle. But this also has a weird little useless spur. that is connected by some lost
right.
panels.
It does have a like historical purpose in the world that's now broken. But...
Yeah. But so I think this gives us an interesting perspective on this statue, because from standing on this spur here, you can see this person has their arm reaching straight down, and we'll swap in a higher resolution photo here, because if you're watching on YouTube, you probably can't even see the little dot here. But you're reaching down to this odd little dot in the sky, right? What is this odd little dot? In the ending of the game, when you get whooshed up by that elevator, the game references a star at dawn as a symbol of like fleetingness and impermanence. But this isn't even at dawn, right? Like you can't see stars in the day because they're all too dim. So this, I think, is actually Venus, the morning star, which is Venus is like the brightest object that you can see in the night sky, besides the sun and the moon, of course, and besides like occasional flares from satellites like the International Space Station. But I don't think the ISS exists in the world of the witness. So you can see it in the daytime. Venus goes through different phases. Sometimes it's brighter, sometimes it's less bright, sometimes it's much closer to the sun. But this is like appropriate spacing for. Sorry, I'm like a astronomy, like astrophysics guy.
Yeah.
So there's like a little bit of
You're
lore.
like double checking this is correct.
Yeah, but like Venus at its brightest and most distant from the sun is around 45 degrees from the sun. That's about its greatest extent, which kind of checks out with, it looks like the sun is about 45 degrees high in the sky, and then this is way down here. So the astronomy kind of checks out. It's the only thing that you can see in the daytime. It's very faint, but if you know where to look for it, then it is pretty cool to like literally see a planet. And it's more than just a weird astronomy nerd fact. Venus has a long history of kind of mythological associations that I think fit really well with the themes of the witness. So for a long time in ancient Greek, even though the ancient Greeks were pretty decent at astronomy, they had two names for Venus. They called it what is it like?
They called it the evening star and the morning
yes,
star.
Yes, the evening star and the morning star. It was like Hesperos and like Vesperos or something. They had two different names for this very bright star that would wander and sometimes appear in the evening sky and sometimes appear in the morning sky. And then of course it's hard to see it when it's right near the sun, and it gets dimmer when it's near the sun and brighter when it's farther away. And so it was this mysterious thing, this brightest star in the sky that would wander around, and then it would appear on two sides. And they thought it was two distinct objects, and it was like a great realization for them to realize that actually it was the same object, that the morning star is the evening star, and then this is one thing that goes back and forth, crossing over the sun. So that, obviously kind of has a lot of resonance for the witness and its themes of like trying to bridge these two, trying to bridge this seemingly impossible gap, or like realizing that the two things are really one, that the seemingly incompatible, like the third person and the first person perspectives on life are really like, they're it's the same object underneath, right? Like there's one reality that's generating these seemingly irreconcilable, different views of the world or different types of knowledge. So Venus's history as the morning star and the evening star, I think is very resonant with the core themes of the witness. Yeah, the names were Isophorus and Hesperus, which were thought of as two different gods, and then the Greeks realized, I think partway through their civilization's history, that they were really the same. Another association that Venus has is of being from Christian mythology, is the association with Lucifer, right, as the morning star, like in Milton, because he was the strongest of the angels cast out from heaven, so I think I forget the name exactly, that there's like another weird mythological name. It might just literally be Lucifer, and now we just think of that as a demon name, but the morning star has been a symbol in poems like Paradise Lost and all sorts of Christian mythology of like kind of the arrogance of Lucifer for standing up to God, or as of being second second best to God. So I'll read a little bit from just the Wikipedia page of Lucifer. It's one of the various figures in folklore associated with the planet Venus. The entity's name was subsequently absorbed into Christianity as a name for the devil. Modern scholarship translates the term in the Bible passage as morning star or shining one. So it's just like
Lucifer, like shining.
Yes,
yeah.
light bringing, light bringer. So it's kind of an image of. I mean, in Christianity, it's like obviously considered very arrogant to think of yourself as next to God. That's like a satanic thing to do. But it's kind of a Promethean image of the person who's trying to cross the gap and become like the divine, or has a little bit of is like approaching divinity, but still outclassed by the highest level of divinity. So in The Witness, I think this is taking it. There's also a beautiful quote in Walden. We got to look this up. So there's a beautiful quote in Walden about the morning star, which is giving a bit of a more positive spin on the Lucifer connotation. So that all goes to show that despite being a tiny, tiny little dot in the skybox that totally blends in with all the little clouds around the horizon, I think this is a very important little pixel, the most important pixel in the game, because it symbolizes something that's very rare and precious, which is a kind of halfway point. So the sun has been the symbol throughout The Witness. There's the sun-worshipping people in the ancient desert, all the way to the kind of like super science in the mountain that produces that sun environmental puzzle in the entry castle courtyard that like warps you to the true ending of the game. And the sun has always been a symbol throughout The Witness of like the highest, these impossible to reach things, like Nicholas of Cusa reaching up towards the sun, trying to get the goblet. It's this impossibly distant, you can't even look at it, it's so bright. Like it's a source of clarity. It's like in Plato's thought experiment with the cave and the sun as the pure form of the good. It's like shining that divine light that like creates the whole universe, allows for vision, allows for all of our experience by lighting up the earth. So the sun is this analogy for like this ungraspable, impossibly distant thing that we could never achieve, and is this paradoxical thing that we're striving for, but we know we can't even imagine how we could get closer to it. But then down here on the horizon, way more accessible than the sun, which is hanging high in the sky there, is this thing which is like, it's bright. It's like a halfway step. It's like something that seems almost achievable. It's like the sun and this like divine clarity have seemed so inaccessible, like zero tractability. How do we even grasp? How do we even conceive of this? How to leap over Nicholas Cusa's wall of paradise and get to this other world that is like a totally different realization or understanding. But then when you see the morning star rising here in the sky, you think, well, like maybe there's a way, maybe there's steps, maybe there's some way that this can become modular, and that we can build an intermediate understanding or achieve some kind of reflection of the thing that we really want, even if that ultimate realization is like still so far away. So anyways, the statue reaching down towards the morning star is a really beautiful image, and just adds yet another layer of meaning onto these this series of statues, and provides more clarity on like what is this aspirational thing that we're supposed to be reaching towards, right? So the kind of sun symbolism and Venus symbolism helps make it more concrete, like what this attitude of exploration should be applied to, and kind of the whole ideology of the game. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna read that Walden quote a bit of a few paragraphs from the last section of his famous book, of Thoreau's famous book, while we head over to a different part of the island here. So, there is not one of my readers who has yet lived a whole human life. These may be but the spring months in the life of the race. If we have had the 7 years itch, we have not yet seen the 17-year locust yet in Concord. We are acquainted with a mere pestle of the globe on which we live. So it's like our life is so small. We've only been around here for such a short time. Kind of like the audiologue on the mountain, where you have the lecture by the astronomer talking about how if the humanity was a child, we'd just be like a tiny baby in the crib. We'd have this whole universe to expand into. Most have not delved 6 feet beneath the surface, nor leaped as many above it. We know not where we are. Beside, we are sound asleep nearly half our time. Yet we esteem ourselves wise, and have an established order on the surface. Truly, we are deep thinkers. We are ambitious spirits. He's kind of mocking us. He's saying, like, we have so little. We've established all our nations and things. People think they're so wise, but there's this huge world out there, ready to be explored. As I stand over the insect crawling amid the pine needles on the forest floor, and endeavoring to conceal itself from my sight, and ask myself why it will cherish those humble thoughts, and hide its head from me, who might, perhaps, be its benefactor, and impart to its race of the little insects some cheering information, I am reminded of the great benefactor and intelligence that stands over me, the human insect. So he's thinking of himself in the forest, watching the tiny bug, and an analogy to like a super intelligence, like a god of the whole universe that is like, looking down at humans, again, in their infancy, in their smallness, evoking this kind of transcendent imagery. The life in us is like the water in the river. It may rise this year higher than man has ever known it, and flood the parched uplands. Even this may be the eventful year, which will drown out all our muskrats. It was not always dry land where we dwell. I see far inland the banks which the stream anciently washed, before science began to record its freshets. Everyone has heard the story which has gone the rounds of New England, of a strong and beautiful bug which came out of the dry leaf of an old table of apple tree wood, which had stood in a farmer's kitchen for 60 years, from an egg deposited in the living tree many years earlier still, and as appeared by counting the annual layers beyond it, which was heard gnawing out for several weeks, hatched perchance by the heat of an urn. Who does not feel his faith in a resurrection and immortality strengthened by hearing of this? Who knows what beautiful and winged life, whose egg has been buried for ages under many concentric layers of woodenness in the dead, dry life of society, deposited at first in the auburn of the green and living tree, which has been gradually converted into the semblance of its well-seasoned tomb, heard perchance gnawing out now for years by the astonished family of man as they sat round the festive board, may unexpectedly come forth from amidst society's most trivial and hand-sewed furniture to enjoy its perfect summer life at last. So obviously he has imagery of sort of like Christian religious imagery of, the resurrection, but he's also talking about a personal rebirth, right? Of like the dry woodenness of society. This guy who like went out into the woods to get away from kind of like the shallowness that he felt he saw all around him, and he's saying like, you have the potential in you to have your life transformed by looking at the world anew and kind of like engaging with all of these spiritual questions and experiences. I do not say that John or Jonathan will realize all this. I have no idea what that's supposed to be referring to, but it's hilarious that Jonathan Blow made the witness. But such is the character of that morrow which mere lapse of time can never make to dawn. The light which puts out our eyes is darkness to us. Only that day dawns to which we are awake. There is more day to dawn. The sun is but a morning star. And then that's the conclusion of the book. The sun is but a morning star. So it's like this transcendent call to think of like all of this experience of life that we have now is just a prelude, and there's like such a richer experience, this transcendent experience that we could access somehow, if we kind of are ambitious and open-minded and attuned to the world around us, and maybe have some of that attitude of that Titanic statue that we've been talking about. The sun is but a morning star. Like right now, we're just seeing little Venus in our life experience, but like soon there will be this greater dawn that happens when the real sun rises, like a awakening. Just like how Buddhism uses the analogy of like asleep to awake, but even there's another awakening behind that of like awaking to a true awareness of your experience and your place in the universe. Same thing. It's like there's been this little dawn of what you think is the sun, but really it's just the morning star, and the real sun will come and illuminate things so much more strongly. I remember there was some interview with Jonathan Blow once where it talked about him listening to Walden on audiobook in the Atlantic profile called The Most Dangerous Gamer, which came out after Braid, when Braid was becoming famous. So Jonathan Blow has at least listened to Walden, but I don't know if he was thinking about it when he was putting together the game. So here we are in the mangroves area, more kind of meditatively themed, even though it has just as hardcore of puzzles. Of course, we'll cover all that in our mangrove episode, so you can check that out for more details. But when I told you that this aspirational statue reaching up and all that symbolism was the biggest statue of the witness, of course, I was lying to you guys. The biggest statue of the witness is this kind of illusory natural formation right here. And I think that's interesting, right? Because as Titanic as that one, it's like this is even bigger, but it's hidden, right? And I feel like there's a bit of an affinity between the aspirational, like reaching forward statue and the Marsh area, which is the science, has kind of a science affinity, has more of a civilizational tone of like this is this collaborative effort, we're piecing things together. The morning star is a stepping stone to this like inaccessible sun, and then we have this image which is even bigger, like maybe kind of showing the superiority of the like the kind of direct experience compared to this sort of naive like Feynman approach of, oh, don't worry, we'll just stack up all the sciences and then understand. But also that it's not as communicable. It's harder to see. You kind of have to realize it for yourself. It can't therefore be civilizational as easily because it's more difficult to share.
I think it's like you can't access it as intentionally. Whereas the other you can kind of like attempt to strive for or like head in that direction. This is sort of underneath and it's less controllable. Yeah.
So this is like just the relationship between those two different modes of experience that the witness has always been so interested in. And of course, so this is a meditative woman here in parallel, and again a woman, so it seemed like the fact that we can see both of these in the frame, and this aspiration, it's almost like she's dreaming, right, lying on her side like those sleeping Buddha statues, and the sleeping Buddha statues are actually kind of statues of like the death of the Buddha. It's like kind of like a final like meditation and passing into nirvana, in the Buddha's like 80th year or something, and then died. So we have this like meditating woman, but because she's sideways, it's sort of like a sleeping woman, and then it's almost like she's envisioning like the aspirational image and the kind of surreal image of like the transforming and coming being out of the rock is like a thought that's springing out of this meditator's sleeping head. So anyways, you can see the arms here and the praying hands and hips and knees all laid out sideways, and she even has hair in the form of this the outlines of the trees here.
It seems like she's kneeling, which maybe is alluding to kind of the Christian prayer. But I don't associate her with that.
That's true. Much. Yeah, this isn't a meditative pose. It is a prayer pose. So that kind of makes it a non-denominational, because the attitude seems to be so much, it seems to be very meditative, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of just alluding to the across the board, like it's internal, right? Her eyes are closed, and just the fact that it's this reflection illusion. It's kind of internal experience in contrast to this person who's like striding forward, arms outstretched, like embracing the universe and the sensory experience of everything. This person is introspectively focused, examining their own thoughts. Just kind of a beautiful contrast that there's a relationship between these two sculptures, that they're both visible in frame like this.
Maybe I got it backwards when I said earlier about how like this is less controlled, because this almost seems like how one attains that kind of striving. Like it's difficult to just do that without having the answer already in front of you, whereas this is the kind of self-reflective openness attitude that kind of allows you to reach those heights.
Yeah. And I just love the triple scale of like the helping hand woman who is like human scale, kind of just societal. Like I'm going to help you out. I'm having this social relationship. I want to help people. I want, to like the kind of Titanic civilizational scale woman, to like the kind of continental, like, woman who's like the soul of the whole earth or something, like the island, the nature upon which the civilization was built or something. And also like the fundamental truth, that's like the truth of our own experience. So I don't know, just the kind of like the fact that you have this triple thing is just such a surprising and intricate network. Of course, just like I was saying earlier, we have this kind of board out here indicating that there's a viewpoint. There's like another around yonder that obviously is a viewpoint for the ship. It has an audio log here, which we'll cover in the mangroves episode. But now the witness is like trying to get you to think like, what am I supposed to see out here? It's trying to help you out. So this rock image is also just like the environmental puzzles. It's totally about like sudden realization.
Yes.
And the holistic perception of things, that you need to kind of step back, have like this wide field awareness, take in all the information as one big picture, not looking at the little facts of the individual sciences and experiments and things, but kind of like appreciating your whole visual field or your whole experience, and trying to see the things that are kind of hidden in plain sight because of how big they are.
Yeah, you would not be able to see that if you were not looking at your whole field of view. You couldn't like see one bit of it and be like, oh, that kind of looks like a hand or a face or something.
So to reinforce the image of the kind of holistic perspective of of this slightly like meditative aligned mangroves area, and of that statue versus this sort of reductionistic like scientific modular hierarchical zone of the marsh, we can have an actual path that we can walk through here, right? And we're like walking through the characteristics of of the statue, but it doesn't look anything like a statue when you're coming back here, precisely because we're too close to it. It's like you get closer to try and examine this thing, and but then it's lost. It's like it's only visible from the big picture. So like these are like the hips
legs,
and thighs, and then here we have like the arm, and these are the fingers out here that make the praying hand. There's the face and the nose floating as a rock above it, the hair and all of this, but it's it doesn't come together as a face, obviously, when we're up close like this, and as a commentary on that experience of like trying to get closer, but then everything dissolves.
Like you're doing this very exact thing. You're running up here. You're like, wait, I want to see it.
Yeah. And
you're like trying to see the face, so you run out here on the finger.
Yeah, it's like barely perceptible. This is like a big pair of lips or something. But and it's interesting. The game really lets you get like right up close, and you get to like be in again, just like the other ones where you're like getting to be on the head, placing yourself in the perspective of the statue, or getting the statue reaching down to you. You kind of get to place yourself inside, but here it kind of falls apart because you need that holistic kind of wide field perspective in order to understand. Look, there's the fingers of the hand are also pointing right at the morning star there. So anyway, so we have this great audio log, which is a commentary on reductionism versus holism.
We have two kinds of knowledge which I call symbolic and intimate. I do not know whether it would be correct to say that reasoning is only applicable to symbolic knowledge, but the more customary forms of reasoning have been developed for symbolic knowledge only. The intimate knowledge will not submit to codification and analysis, or rather, when we attempt to analyze it, the intimacy is lost and replaced by symbolism. For an illustration, let us consider humor. I suppose that humor can be analyzed to some extent and the essential ingredients of the different kinds of wit classified. Suppose that we are offered an alleged joke. We subject it to scientific analysis as we would a chemical salt of doubtful nature, and perhaps after careful consideration, we are able to confirm that it really and truly is a joke. Logically, I suppose, our next procedure would be to laugh. But it may certainly be predicted that as the result of this scrutiny, we shall have lost all inclination we ever had to laugh at it. It simply does not do to expose the workings of a joke. The classification concerns a symbolic knowledge of humor, which preserves all the characteristics of a joke except its laughableness. The real appreciation must come spontaneously, not introspectively. I think this is a not unfair analogy for our mystical feeling for nature, and I would venture even to apply it to our mystical experience of God. There are some to whom the sense of a divine presence irradiating the soul is one of the most obvious things of experience. In their view, a man without this sense is to be regarded as we regard a man without a sense of humor. The absence is a kind of mental deficiency. We may try to analyze the experience as we analyze humor and construct a theology, or it may be an atheistic philosophy. But let us not forget that the theology is symbolic knowledge, whereas the experience is intimate knowledge. And as laughter cannot be compelled by the scientific exposition of the structure of a joke, so a philosophic discussion of the attributes of God, or an impersonal substitute, is likely to miss the intimate response of the spirit, which is the central point of the religious experience. Arthur Eddington, 1927.
So, I would think that audio log probably doesn't need too much elaboration given our previous discussion, right? We have the intimate knowledge is the kind of holistic perspective that we can get from across the water there, versus the symbolic knowledge is our experience traveling through here. We have this useful shortcut, we can kind of like analyze, we can see all these rocks in detail, but there's also something that we can miss out on by just taking a kind of reductionist approach of like trying to break everything down into its smaller components, right? Like we break the nose down into smaller components and we lose the face. So this is kind of a counterpoint to that Feynman audio log about the hierarchy of all the sciences and how they build on each other in the different perspectives on the glass of wine. It's like you don't want to lose sight of the experience of the glass of wine, right? As Feynman mentions at the end. I think also this is just kind of like another example of the hilarious like audio log placement in The Witness, because so this is if you're when you find this audio log, you're playing the Marsh, right? Like maybe you're like completing this area and you just solve some of these little bonus extra hard puzzles here. And you're gonna zip around and like, you know, unlock some stuff around the backside. So you're totally in this like scientific puzzle solving mode, and maybe you take a nice break of like exploring this like fun little, you know, rock zone. But the context for this, just lying out here on a rock, is going to be very obscure to you, and so you're not going to understand why it's placed here, which is kind of funny because the whole joke about this is that you're like, you might miss the big picture, and in this case, you're like too close. By the time you actually get to the audio log, you cannot see why the audio log is here, versus when you're over on the other side, you know, you can see perfectly well what the context of the audio log is, because then you realize about this huge statue. So I just find that, and you know, it's funny that it's like an audio log about jokes, and how if you overanalyze the joke, then like it loses its power. As an analogy for these big philosophical themes. And then this audio log itself is placed here as like a joke, which it is impossible to get if you're coming through here for precisely the reasons, for like an analogous reason, because you are physically too close to see the context. Just like how if you're doing the scientific analysis of the joke, you're too close to, you know, to appreciate the meaning or the humor of it. So I don't know. I guess another way of thinking of this is like, maybe you arrive on the boat on, you know, in the mangroves thing, you see this amazing sculpture, you're like, wow, that's so crazy, let me come over there and check it out. You ride the boat across like we did, you come over here, you know, and then it's like, wait, but like, what happened to the sculpture? You know, like I wanted to like, you know, this is clearly a zone of like great, I don't know, just like meditative importance or something. Like there's probably some good info here. And then you come over here and it's like, wait a second, like it's just rocks. Now that I'm looking at it more closely, what happened? What went wrong? And then you click on this audio log and it'll tell you what went wrong. It's like, you know, you examined it too much. You tried to break it apart or break it down, you know, and now the power of the joke is lost. So anyways, I think that's really funny, and I think that all those layers of detail make it more funny, which is again kind of ironic because I just spent like 5 minutes explaining this joke, but I thought that it was fun, so I don't know, maybe sometimes explaining the joke does work, which means that Feynman is right, whatever. So anyways, there's just so many layers, man. This is what I like about The Witness. And then just as a final little detail here, we have this awesome dove image that is put together. I think actually it's a little better over here. Yeah, so we have this cool, like, you know, just like the tree in the desert near the quarry. You know, we have all of these carefully placed sticks coming together to make this image of this like flying, you know, ascending dove that's kind of like soaring upwards towards the sun. Another kind of hopeful sign. So this is just like neat. I guess it's a dove, except I think this is also placed here. Like this could have been anywhere, you know, like they just made these trees. They could have put them wherever. Maybe they put them here because they thought this path was too boring or something. But consider with our knowledge where we are in the context of the overall sculpture of the woman here, right? This is like that spot right above her head. That's her head right here. Maybe we'll have to like insert an image of the sculpture with like a big red arrow pointing to where we're standing at. So we're right above her head, and then there's this like dove that's coming down. That's almost kind of like, you know, with the sun shining through it. So I don't know. To me, this seems like the Christian symbolism of the Holy Ghost, which is often represented as a dove, as kind of this. I've probably said before in this series that I have never been able to fully understand what the Holy Ghost is, but it seems sometimes kind of like it's God like giving the breath of life to you. So it's sort of like sending the divinity, just like the quote of the wine and no glass, or glass and no wine. It's like, what's the difference between our spirit and God's spirit? Or like the principle, like what's the difference between consciousness and like the principle of the universe that makes consciousness possible? Like, is it all the same thing? Are we all kind of one somehow? Am I like tied into some field of consciousness? So anyway, so that's kind of how I think of the Holy Ghost from Christianity, but I would love if there are some like hardcore Christians out there who could explain this a little better. So I kind of see this as like the dove being sent down by God and entering, like the person's head to give them, that kind of divinity, to like kind of give them consciousness and a connection to the divine and the like divinity that is unique to the human spirit, sort of like putting the spirit into the body. So it's another kind of symbol of all those themes that the witness is concerned about, to have this, like when you realize the context, it's like the dove is like, coming from the sun and going into this person who's meditating. So it's like they're having that divine, or praying, I suppose, with their hand position, so they're having that kind of cool connection to the divine. So we're just cutting over here to note that the statue is also, of course, it's kind of like beckons you up the mountain. It's visible. It's visible even way from across the lake, and in profile. And then it's visible here as you kind of like take this path up the mountain every once in a while from high points. You can see it, and of course from down, kind of walking up the other way to the mountain. It's obviously super kind of calling you upwards. It's a necessary stop on your way up. So it's kind of like calling you up to that height, right? To like go and encouraging you to go and kind of complete the game and master all the ideas. But we've also been talking about the sun symbolism and how that represents this like divine unattainable thing. And from most perspectives throughout the Marsh, she's not particularly reaching for the sun. But that kind of raises the question of like, well, come on, it's got to line up from somewhere. Just like the other character is down there reaching for the morning star. And as my wife discovered just in the course of making this video, the point where she's reaching for the sun is exactly along the track of this this little wooden entryway that comes into the marsh. So as we follow along the planks here, you can see exactly what plays out. So the sun starts like hidden behind a cloud, right? And then it peeks out from that cloud and moves down into full view. And then there's this kink in the path that takes the sun right over to her, and right where she like touches the sun, like in the what's that Vatican image of like God and Adam, it's like her finger just touches it, and then it moves into shadow because sort of the show has ended. But I don't know, I thought that was really wonderful. And if you've ever wondered like why this path is wood and this one is steel, or why it has this weird bend or whatever, I don't know, maybe part of the reason is that it's tracing out the perspective from which the sun seems to finally be attained by this Titanic statue up there. So I think that is all the connections between the statues of this area, but that just stands out to me as a real epitome of the kinds of things that the witness is up to. The fact that it's not just like these one-off like interesting illusions and things. There's this very complex mesh of different symbolism and like the careful construction of the game worlds, so that all these ideas are like interplaying and weaving the island together. But there's a hell of a lot of symbolism in this game. Hope you guys have enjoyed this episode, and thanks so much for examining the witness together with me. So see you next time.